So hey guys, today we are going to talk about the Barbarian class change in 202 for Player's Handbook. And I want to focus on one class at a time because originally I was planning to do all in one video until I realized how many changes there actually are. And this way I feel like it's more comprehensive and constructive. And also I have more contents to make. So anyway, let's begin. Just a reminder that this video is not sponsored in any way, so I'm just going to talk whatever I feel like to be the right observation. So for the Barbarian, we are going to talk mainly about the class changes, but we are also going to highlight some of the good subclass changes and some of the bad ones. So at level 1 you get Rage as usual, and Rage actually gets a very decent buff in my opinion, because when you can do Rage as a bonus action now, and you have the ability to get some Rage usage back on a short rest, which is really one of the main concerns I have for the 2014 Barbarian. I feel like having just a fixed number of rage a day without any means to replenish their strongest offensive resources. Not very fun for any player, so I like the change here. And of course, you also have a better way to hold your rage usage. So back then it was to do damage or lose rage. Now you have 3 ways to hold your rage application, and basically you can make an attack roll against an enemy, you can force an enemy to make a saving throw, or you can take a bonus action to extend your rage. So I really like this. It makes your character more proactive and your rage usage to last more reliably. And of course the duration of rage also extends. Usually it was 1 minute, now it is 10 minutes. So overall I really like the changes with rage. I think it's really well done. And there is also weapon mastery. I'm not gonna get too much into it. Basically, the weapons have more flavor and mechanical usage now, and we're gonna go into the weapon in the next video. So next up is Danger Sense. So Danger Sense have a interesting change in words. So usually back then it was to have advantage on dexterity saving throws on stuff you can see. Now you just have dexterity saving throw advantage, unless you have the incapacitated condition. So again, more universally applicable, but it takes away some of the flavor wordings that makes the Barbarian more of an adventurer. And now you have reckless attack. I think it's not a new surprise for anyone, but reckless attack does get some interesting changes later on. So at level 3, you get Barbarian subclasses, and I'm just going to talk about some of the things I like regarding the changes. Berserker. Berserker here is actually really good regarding the changes they have. So for those who are unfamiliar with the Berserker subclass, at level 3 you get Frenzy. So now you don't have to get a level of exhaustion after using Frenzy, which is amazing because I thought it was too harsh of a debuff back then. And now you don't have the Totem Warrior Barbarian anymore. You have the Wild Heart Barbarian, which is a subclass in Baldur's Gate 3. Which, by the way, if you guys want to see me do a live stream for the patch 7 Baldur's Gate run, let me know, because that is something I'm interested in doing, but I need because I'm a MacBook user, I need MacBook to update Steam to its latest patch first. So let's move on to the Wild Heart. Wild Heart is interesting. At first I thought it is a huge debuff for the Totem Warrior, but I realized that it is pretty well balanced actually. So basically back then in Totem Warrior you get resistance to all damages except for Psychic. Now you have all resistance except for Force, Necrotic, Psychic, and Radiant. So I understand the change. I understand that some of the more powerful and rare damage type is not resisted. It still kind of sucks, but it's not too bad either. I guess you just have to be more careful with when you are using Rage and to take more care regarding your enemy's type. But it is a debuff by all means. You also get Eagle and Wolf, but no one really cares about those. So let's move on to the World Tree, the new subclass for Player's Handbook 2024. So this class basically do a bunch of temporary hit points buffs at level 3, making you and your allies more tanky. Zealots is also one that has great changes in my opinion. Back then they have some of the more weird flavor text, like using resurrection spells on a Zealot Barbarian doesn't need any material consumption. So I didn't really like that. Now instead of having something like that, you get to not only have your weapon or an arm strike to have extra damage, which is good because you have unarmed strike now. You also have Warrior of the Gods. So basically you can expand some die from your pool of healing as a bonus action to get some hit points back. And that's good because that means that you can survive longer and you get more healing. So let's move on to Primal Knowledge. So basically you get to use Barbarian bonus skill for level 3. And when your rage is active, doing some of the ability checks allows you to use your strength check, including acrobatics, intimidation, perception, stealth, or survival. So that is very good. I mean, it's in combat, so it's not something that you usually use a lot, but having stealth or intimidation, etc., as an option while you're raging, since your rage lasts 10 minutes now, that is actually something you can look forward to using. And after level 5 extra attack and fast movement, which are the same, we are moving on to the level 6 subclass features. So basically, you get the same stuff for all the class before, that is the same like Ancestral Guardian, so I'm not gonna go too much into them. But we're gonna return to the Berserker. So Berserker now have immunity to Charm and Frightened. And if you are Charmed or Frightened when you enter your rage, the condition ends on you. So that is very good. Immunity to anything is always a buff. And Charm and Frighten is very common as you level up. So that is a good change. I like it mechanically. And we're going to move on to the Wild Heart level 6 feature. So instead of getting some additional boons as Bear or Eagle or Wolf, now you get something new called the Owl Panther and Salmon. Salmon is interesting because you get a swim speed. You can also get climb speed or an additional dark vision. So I compared this with the level 6 Totem Warrior and I thought like this is actually more combat capable. I will actually use climb speed or swimming speed depending on the campaign, but dark vision buff is always solid. It's not really anything impressive, but it's good. So next up is the World Tree path. So again, it does something interesting here. You are able to pull some of your enemies towards you and render their speed to 0. So that is actually very good for a protector because now you are able to control where they appear in the battlefield and basically get a sentinel equivalent of movement cancellation. So I like that. I think it's a very powerful ability. And you get the Zealot level 6 ability. When you fail a saving throw, you can reroll with a bonus equal to your rage damage bonus. So this is basically the same as before, but you get a bonus in the saving throw reroll. So this is really good. My core problem with such a mechanic before is that you're just doing a reroll, but there's nothing special there. No advantage, not buff, and now they kind of fix this. Now level 7, you get advantage on initiative roll with Feral Instinct. And if I remember correctly, this is a slight debuff from the version before. But it's not too significant, so it's fine. I'm gonna move on. And you also have Instinctive Pounce. I think it's the same thing. Now level 9 is the key mechanical change. Back then with Brutal Critical, you are able to add critical die when you hit a critical roll. So that is pretty powerful, but it's really situational and you kind of have to build for it, which is something that people don't really do. So instead now you get Brutal Strikes. So what this is basically when you're using Reckless Attack, you can forego the advantage on one strength-based attack roll and instead do something interesting. So the interesting stuff are control and movements. For example, at level 9, you get Forceful Blow, which you can push enemies away, and you can also reduce the speed of your enemy or your target if you are a dick to your friends. But I think these are pretty nice changes depending on the situation, and it actually makes, in my opinion, Reckless Attack more attractive. Sometimes you don't really need advantage when you're hitting your enemies anyway, so doing something interesting with no resource cost is very good. So we're moving on to the level 10 stuff. And again, here Berserker have a nice change in mechanics. Basically, they swapped the level 10 and 14 feature and kind of changed the 14 feature. So I'm going to talk a bit later. But at level 10, you can now do a melee attack with your reaction using weapon or unarmed strike. So I can see that they're trying to push unarmed strike to be something more interesting and useful for the barbarian. So I like that. And for the wild hearts, now you get the same stuff. Commune with nature as a ritual. It's a flavor one, so it's fine. For World Tree, you have something interesting again. You get a larger reach with 10 feet using melee weapon, and you are able to activate some of the weapon mastery properties. So I'm not gonna get too much into it, but it is a good change. It's a solid use. And we're also looking at the Zealot presence. So for the Zealot presence, it's a different mechanic one. Basically, you can use your bonus action to unleash a battle cry for 10 other creatures to get advantage on attack rolls and saving throws until the next turn. It's the same from before, but you can expand one use of your rage to restore your use. So this is actually very good because now as a barbarian, as I said, you have ability to use your short rest to get some rage back. So it means that you can use that expanded rage to feel your Zealot's presence. It's fine, it's pretty nice. So moving on to level 11 and above. At level 11, you get Relentless Rage, which means that when you drop to 0 hit points, you can make a DC 10 check and your hit points change to a number equal to twice your barbarian level. So it's the same from before, but basically you get more hit points back when you fall to 0. So that is pretty nice. And at level 13, you get improved brutal strike. That means you get 2 more options. Staggering blow means that the target has disadvantage on the next saving throw it makes, and you can't make any opportunity attacks until the start of your next turn. For Sundering Blow, before the start of your next turn, the next attack roll made by another creature against the target gains a +5 bonus to the roll. And these two, to me, is really, really good in combat, like universally useful. And I'm probably using Reckless Attack more for these two features. These are really good changes in my opinion. And 14 again, you get some subclass changes. And here we are looking at the Berserker again. So back then, this feature is pretty bad. You can do Frightened Condition for 1 minute at your targets, but they have to rely on your Charisma modifier. And no barbarian in the world is going to have a high enough Charisma to justify using this. But now instead of Charisma, they are using your Strength modifier. So it actually has a nice usage here, and I like the change. Like this is actually usable now. For the Wild Heart level 14 feature, you get Falcon, Lion, and Ram. So for Falcon, you get a flying speed, and the flying speed actually gets buffed because back then, when you are flying as a Falcon, you have to fall back down in the same turn, or you fall and get some falling damage. Now that doesn't happen, you just get a permanent flying speed while you're raging. And Lion and Ram is also pretty good. For Lion, any of your enemies within 5 feet of you have disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you, so it is a debuff to your enemies. For Ram, you can cause a large or smaller creature to have the prone condition when you hit, so that is pretty good. It means that you don't really need a saving throw for the prone condition to land, and considering that you have extra attack, this is really useful for a melee combatant. Now for the World Tree level 14 feature, when you activate your Rage and as a bonus action while your Rage is active, you can teleport up to 60 feet you can see. So that is already pretty powerful. Having any form of teleportation increases your movements and your versatility. And you can also increase the range to 150 feet once per rage. When you do so, 6 willing creatures who are within 10 feet of you also gets teleported. So this is actually a mini version of teleport and it's really helpful to prevent a TPK. So I like the feature. Again, I feel like the World Tree is more of a support character here, and the support stuff are actually really solid and impressive. It is not the mechanically strongest still in my opinion. I think the Berserker actually is rising up to that level, and I already love the Giant's Barbarian, but World Tree is pretty cool. It's pretty nice, it's pretty flavorful. And for the Zealot level 14, they changed the feature. So instead of not being able to die when you are dead, back in 2014. Now you have Rage of the Gods. So that means that you can take the form of a Divine Warrior. So what happens as a Divine Warrior is that you have a flying speed and you can hover. You have resistance to necrotic, psychic, and radiant damage, which, by the way, is what I believe to be the differentiation points for the Wild Heart's resistances. And when a creature within 30 feet of you drop to 0 hit points, you can take a reaction and expend a use of your rage. The change is hit points equal to your barbarian level. So, per the wording, you should be able to use this on yourself. But since you have to use a reaction, that is pretty much not going to work. So this is again more of a support ability, I think. But again, it is a pretty good change. It's pretty powerful. So at level 15, you get Persistent Rage, which means that when you roll initiative for once per long rest, you can get all your rage back. This is always good. And you can also basically sustain your rage. It only ends when you have the unconscious condition. So this is slightly more versatile. I like it. At level 17, you get another improved Brutal Strike. This time, your Brutal Strike damage increases by 2d10, and you can use two different Brutal Strikes effects together. So this allows for some exploits. I have not figured out what the exploit is, but for example, Staggering Strike and Sundering Strike being used together every turn is pretty crazy. And you actually have a nice mechanics to be versatile in combats because you have more options now, similar to how a fighter gets, Battle Master maneuvers. So I like the new improved Brutal Strike. So at level 18 is the same thing. Indomitable Might is just a name change. You get the strength check buff. And at level 19, you now have the option to use an epic boon. So epic boon can be worth it on a martial. And for your options here, I will recommend two. Number one is the boon of combat prowess, which means that once per turn, you can turn a miss into a hit, which is always good. And number two, you get boon of irresistible offense, which means that you bypass physical resistances and you get some buff to your damage. And that is pretty flavorful for a barbarian. It's what the class 2024 Player's Handbook recommend. And I think both is pretty good. You can use both depending on your build. And at level 20, you get Primary Champion, which means that you can raise your Constitution and Strength by 4 to the maximum of 25. So this is actually a weird change in my opinion. Before it was 24, now it's 25. I'm not sure when will this be useful at all. But having a +1 in something is always good, even though it's an odd number. So I'm not sure why this is changed, but it's fine. It's cool. So overall, what do I think about the 2024 Barbarian? I feel like this is a change that really benefits the Barbarian mechanically. So for some summary highlights, they get short rest, recharge of rage. At high levels, they get rage back more consistently. Their rage are longer duration, easier to maintain, and all their base abilities get some kind of buff. Now, Reckless Attack is not just giving you advantage, but giving you some status debuff or movement control or just basic control or having a better accuracy. So that is always good to have more utility. The subclasses have some major changes regarding the Berserker and just discarding the Totem Warrior to Wild Heart, which I think is just okay as a change for the Wild Heart. It's not too bad, it's not too good. There are some buff and some major debuff for the resistance to all damages, which is quite a huge deal, so I don't really like what happened to the Totem Warrior. And I really like the Brutal Strike change. Brutal Critical is cool and allows for some specific builds like using Brutal Critical back then with Half Orc and the Piercer feat, which means that on the critical you get a lot of damage, but now instead you get more versatility and the options are pretty powerful, so I like it. I think Relentless Rage and Persistent Rage are both good, giving more options and more consistency with your abilities and control. Epic Boon is pretty powerful for a martial anyway, and I think Primary Champion is the same, it's fine. So overall, I do prefer the 2024 mechanical changes. and I think this is a class worth playing with the updated 2024 rules. And in future videos, I'm going to move on to the other classes, as you know, but just a fair warning, I think some of the caster classes are going to be a bit harder to rate, and I will be a lot more harsh to some of the changes. Barbarian, it makes sense, but for some of the future class I'm going to talk about, I feel like they are either overcompensating or they just don't understand why they are doing such a change. So anyway, I'm going to end the video here, and I hope that this video helps you to familiarize yourself with the Barbarian class. Signing out.